In the last couple of weeks, Jesus sent the disciples out on mission. Now, today they come back, and they're filled with themselves, and they're tired, and people are following them and won't let them alone. Jesus says, let's go away and let's take some time to rest. So they go, people heard about it and got there ahead of them. It wouldn't let them rest. But what Jesus is seeing in these disciples, they were tired. They had done a lot of work. And he understands that and says, you need a break. You need to rest. Come away and let it alone for a while. Now that message is really not just for that group, but for you and for me and for all of us. In a world today that is as frenetic as ever. Now just think about your lifestyles and all the stuff that's on your plate. When you take a break, have you done your vacations yet? Where are you going? What are you going to do? People come back from vacations more exhausted than when they left. Are you in that group? Where's the rest? Where are we allowed to rest? Now I got to do. Got to keep moving. In many cases, we even need to make appointments with our shut-ins. They're not home. Everybody's on the move. The lifestyle that we live, and it's in our youth, and it's in all of the generations of our life. Where is there in the culture in which we live the opportunity to just do nothing? That is a spiritual thing too. That's not just laziness. Because many times when we have a break, well, what am I going to do? I don't know how to do nothing, or if I do, I start feeling guilty. I should be doing something because there's a backlog of stuff that's unfinished business. Is there not? We're all cut from the same cloth here. But in the matters that relate to God, too much of our spirituality is what we're saying and doing, and we're not attentive to receive and to hear what we need to hear to keep us going. In the Middle Ages, St. Bernard of Clairvaux was quite a prolific theologian, but he was the abbot of a monastery in France. And he gave homilies to the monks. And these have been published. He's renowned for many, many homilies that are recorded in part of the tradition. In one of the homilies, he's lecturing the monks and telling them, when I read it, sounded like today. In this day and age, people are more like a canal than a reservoir. The canal, the water passes through and keeps on going. And it comes and it goes. Nothing stays. In a reservoir, the water wells up, and the overflow is given. He said, people are too much like canals and not enough like reservoirs. That is a spiritual concern. We have to be filled with something that the overflow is what we give. You got to keep replenishing the love and the source, the energy, the goodwill. But if we're running, then we're like the canal. You run out of gas and we burn out. Burnout is a treatable disease, I guess. We're on overload. And certainly the culture does nothing to support the opposite of that. Rest and relax and think and do. I was away a couple of weeks ago, and I visited some family and friends. At the end of the week, I went back to a little Trappist monastery for a retreat, for a little weekend, Friday through Sunday, down in Berryville, Virginia, which is it's very near Winchester. And I think there's only 11 Trappist monks now in that place. Anybody looking for a vocation, I'll send you to Berryville, Virginia. But first we'll sign you up for the Diocese of Greensburg. Anyway, so I went for the weekend. As I was driving in, I felt a peace come over me, even from the week of vacation. And I'd been there many times in the past. I had not been there for a long time. And my memory was that when I went there, I would always calm down, and God was always there. So God's everywhere, but I felt that more uniquely in that situation. As I drove in, that same feeling overtook me. This feeling of great peace, and I need to be here. Now the monks, they are, the Trappists, it's a cloistered group, so they don't do a lot out and around. They have a farm, they support themselves. I think they make fruit cakes and do some baking and other things. They have a gift shop and a bookstore. But they come and go to the chapel and say the office all throughout the day. So the day begins for them at 3:30 a.m., where they go to chapel and read the Psalms. It's called vigils. Then from a little after 4 till 6, they meditate and center, and everything is silent. Then they have morning prayer and Mass around 7. Then they have breakfast, go to their day, come back for 2 o'clock for midday prayer, go back, come back for evening prayer, 5:30, 6 o'clock, have supper, end the day with night prayer at 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then it's silence to the next day. I will not tell you whether or not I got up at 3:30 in the morning to go to those prayers. But the whole day, the whole 24 hours is the coming and going from prayer to work and daily life. That is such a soothing example to experience, because those of us who do not live that kind of a structured life, and we don't, we're not monks and nuns in cloisters, but they model for us praying and working, living, relating to God, and then going back to our daily lives. That's what a spirituality and a faith journey is about. Why do we come here so regularly every Sunday? So that the reservoir, we are canals who need to become reservoirs, so that the love of God wells up inside of us. We experience it anew. We are refreshed in word and sacrament and in community. And the overflow of that is what we take with us into the week. It gives a little bit of structure to our life, coming and going from the Sunday Eucharist, our life and our worship of God. We need this balance. It is about centering, being centered as human beings. And if you're not centered, then you're off-center. And the other word for that is eccentric. We know what that is. We overfunction. We're too much of this, too little of that. We're not rooted. And so therefore a lot of our life is negative and reactionary. So Jesus, in calling forth the disciples to rest, says to us that in our life, we need to tend to that. Not everybody can go on retreats for days or weekends or whatever. We probably need to do more of that kind of stuff in the parish, even days. But even we have like Eucharistic adoration one day a week, nobody comes, everybody's running. Doesn't fit people's lifestyle. So I don't know what's the right way to do that, but we do need to find ways where we can allow God to speak to us, to calm us down, and to then well up in us so that we can move forward in a better way. So we need silence. Now, when you go into your house and nobody's there, What do you turn on first? Some people can't stand to be alone. Got to turn on the TV. I got to do this. Got to get in front of my screen. I don't want to feel that I'm by myself. What are we afraid of? You're going to turn into a pumpkin? What is this fear that I can't simply be? I have to be stimulated. How many messages do we get a day? Is it 10,000? Maybe it's 100,000. You realize how much stimulation we get day in and day out. What do you do with all that? We suffocate in it. How can we rest and relax, think nothing, just to have a good night's sleep, for gosh sakes? How many of us have difficulty resting and sleeping? Now, sometimes that can be an illness and a problem, and that's another issue. But how can you live if you're constantly running? And what do we think this is about before God? Be still and know that I am God. We have to factor in this culture, we have to factor in the ability to do that. So we have to balance silence and just a little bit of being some privacy, just to be with our own thoughts or to think nothing and to rest and not feel guilty about it. We need rest. We don't have to be identified by everything that we do. How do we do that in a positive way, not a negative way? Now, silence is not everything. There's a story told of a woman that joined a cloistered group of nuns who were allowed to speak 2 words every 10 years. You know what's coming. So she joined, and 10 years later, the first 10 years, she went to the superior and she said, "Too hot." She goes back to her daily life. 10 years pass, she comes back to the superior. "Too cold." Goes back, comes back 10 years later, "I quit." The superior says, "Well, you may as well, because you've done nothing but complain since you've been here." Silence isn't everything. If it's not true, it ought to be. Those kind of stories. But they makes the point. We do need silence. We need rest. And in those moments, you know very well that when we experience that, we are renewed and we are better. And the charity and the goodness and the goodwill and the service and the care that we offer is better. I often ask the question, who's taking care of the caretaker? We all need to tend to that. As Jesus says that to the disciples today, he's saying that to you and to me. Come away and let us rest a while and then continue on the journey that leads to eternal life.